the engineering work has been done, and some of the environmental assessment work has been done. So it's definitely on our radar. It's part of the connecting. It would be part of the Connecting Links program, as I understand it. And so it's it becomes an issue of the provincial priorities, and so it's on our radar. I can't tell you that it gets bumped to the top, but it's certainly something that the minister is aware of. What I say to them is that we know that electricity prices have to come down, and that's why by summer people will see a 25% reduction. They've already got 8% reduction. There's going to be another 17% reduction on their bills. And some people who live in more remote and rural areas, in particular distribution companies like InPower, they'll see a 40 to 50% reduction because of very high distribution charges. So we recognize that there's a challenge, and that's why we're taking action. You know what? They're very high salaries. I get that, and there are those discrepancies, and I'm not going to be an apologist for very high salaries. I know that it's a challenge when people are dealing with their electricity prices. My responsibility is twofold: to make sure that in all of our organizations. Now, Hydro One is under a different set of rules now in terms of public disclosure. They have found $60 million in efficiencies and savings. They're a better run company now. But my responsibility is to make sure that where there are executive salaries that are high in our agencies and organizations, that we have a range and that we put caps on those, and we're in the process of doing that. But all of that doesn't solve the problem of people's electricity bills. That's a much broader issue, which is why people are going to see a 25% reduction, because that's what people need. They need that reduction, they need that relief, and they'll see it come summer. I think municipalities and communities need to make those decisions. I think that there are good reasons for some mergers of LDCs. There isn't a magic number that we have. There was a report a few years ago that talked about 12 or 6, like a very small number. Whether that's the number or whether there's a higher number, we don't have a position on that. But what we do believe is that where there can be efficiencies of scale, where people can get better service, if there's a consolidation of LDCs, then I think it's well worth municipalities looking at that. I think that especially where we've got growth, and Ann and I were just talking about the growth because of the Honda plans, which is a good thing. It's a really good thing to have that challenge of increased growth and population, and economic activity. So we're working to make sure that hospitals have the resources that they need. I mean, they've seen, the hospitals in this local health integration network have seen about a $9.9 million increase. The Stevenson Hospital in Alliston, right, has seen about a 10% increase in the last year. So we recognize the challenges, and there have been some reviews that have been asked for through the ministry, and they are. I don't think at this stage that is. I can't speak to that detail. I can certainly take that up with the Minister of Health and see what's happening there. But it is important that communities do their process and come to some consensus as they work with the ministry. I mean, it's kind of a moving target every day. We get updates. So there's a bill moving through the legislature as part of the budget in New York, and there has been, from time to time throughout this process, there's been a Buy America clause in it, and sometimes it's on the table, sometimes it's not. It hasn't landed at this point. We have been on the ground. Our representative in Washington, Monique Smith, has been in Albany. We have other people who are advocating for us in Albany, along with working with Quebec. to argue that because our economies are so integrated, that it would be a very bad thing. It would be detrimental not just to Ontario businesses, but also to New York businesses. There would be jobs that would be at risk if a Buy America policy were put in place. Jobs in Ontario and in New York. So we have said that we think that having an exemption for Ontario and Canada is the way to go. If that doesn't happen, what we have said is that we'll be prepared to look at all options to respond. But we haven't been specific on that yet, but I've been very clear with businesses here in Ontario that we're going to defend their interests, you know, and my hope is that there will be an exemption and we won't have to go to that next stage. I mean, that's exactly the kind of response that we know will be evoked if we don't get an exemption. And you know, I think that there is no doubt that Ontario and New York, Ontario and Michigan, Ontario and Ohio have all benefited from our integrated economies, and so we want to make sure we keep that open border in place. So, you know, it's interesting the moment that we're in right now, because the work that Ontario has done up until this point has largely been done until the new government was elected. The work that we've done shutting down the coal-fired plants, you know, the reductions that we've seen in Ontario, those were all done as part of in the context of a hostile federal government, because the previous government, the Conservative government, wasn't interested in working with provinces on climate change or greenhouse gas emission reduction. So the role that provinces and states have to play is very, very important. We're going to be joining the California market, you know, with Quebec, and so that's a subnational market. That's an arrangement that happens despite what the federal government's policy is. So I believe that we have to continue to move forward. The shutdown of the coal-fired plants in Ontario was the single largest initiative to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in North America, not just in Canada, but in North America. And so we know that we can have an impact, and that's why we are moving ahead. And as I said to the students today, it is about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That's why we chose cap and trade. It will cap the pollution that comes from businesses, and it will produce revenue that can then be reinvested in people's homes, in businesses to further reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it's got that benefit, but it's also got the benefit of driving innovation that creates technology that can be used in other parts of the world. So that's a contribution beyond our borders. We are already investing in protection for the Great Lakes, but I did have a conversation with Governor Kasich of Ohio, and he and I are both very concerned about Great Lakes protection, and we're going to continue to work together, as I will with the other Great Lakes governors. I'll be going to the summit that we'll be holding in Detroit and Windsor in June, and we are very concerned about the protection. We're concerned about invasive species. We're concerned about pollution in the lakes, and so I'll be interested to have that conversation with my colleague governors and Premier Couillard of Quebec, because we are the leaders that are the most responsible for that water, and our constituents expect us to step up. So we'll be working very closely together. There's nothing like being with young people for frank, honest discussion, and great questions. I talked to one of the teachers afterwards, and there were kids coming up to him and saying, I learned something about the tuition, the free tuition for kids from low income families. It's going to make a huge difference to families all over the province. As I say, we're building schools all over the province. There's an $11 billion investment in school infrastructure that's happening across the province. So we will continue to work with school boards. I mean, every school board has a facility conditions index. They know the condition of their schools, and we'll continue to work with them, not just to build new schools, but also to retrofit older ones. I think that there are a couple of things that need to happen. I think that we need to make sure that kids have those skills that, I mean, we don't know exactly what the future economy is going to look like, but we need to make sure they have the skills that they need. So, you know, for example, there aren't enough girls who are taking STEM courses, so the science, technology, energy, and math. I mean, we need to make sure that everybody has access to those. But at the same time, we know that employers need creative thinking, and they need kids who have studied art. So I think we need to make sure that we're allowing for a broad education. I think the real gap in Ontario is experiential learning. So actually giving kids opportunities to be in the workforce, to determine what it is they want to do and be more prepared for the work world. That's what our highly skilled workforce panel has said. We've already got strategies in place. So we've got dual credits where kids can do a high school course and a college course at the same time. We've got specialist high skills majors where kids get more co-op experience. They actually have work experience. But we need to ramp that up. And so the idea that kids before they graduate from high school would have a hands-on work experience, before they graduate from university or college they would have a hands-on work experience. That is the direction that we're going, and we already have some of those initiatives in place.